As you may have heard, immigration has kidnapped and human trafficked a 5-year-old from Minneapolis to Texas. Liam Ramos was taken out in front of his home. I don't have personal experience there, but where I do have personal experience is where he is now in Dilley, Texas.
They're shouting, "Let us out, let us out." There's people in blue shirts. Again, there's drones flying up ahead. I'm outside. I'm outside. It doesn't say out here.
In 2018, I worked as a legal advocate in the South Texas Family Residential Center owned by CORE Civic. CORE Civic is a for-profit corporation that has made billions and billions of dollars off of the internment of migrants. I'm going to tell you what I do know about that facility. So in 2018, again, I was working in that facility. You drive up to it and it looks like a tent with a whole bunch of portables. You park your car, you're not allowed to have any cameras, any phones. So the first portable you enter has 2 metal detectors that you run all of your equipment through. Again, we were not allowed to have any phones, cameras, or any sort of those devices. Those were all taken away from us. And we were only allowed our legal papers, pens, and any research device, so books or, I don't even think we were allowed to have books, but we were allowed to have our yellow legal pad. And so this legal pad and all of these papers were what were in my bag when I worked in that facility. You would go in, you go through 2 rounds of metal detectors, and then you're inside of a what I can only describe as a portable. I went to Texas public schools, so I had a lot of my classes in portables, and what portables are is essentially if a school is overcrowded and underfunded, instead of building a building that's suitable, what they do is they just build a trailer park in the backyard. And so the same type of portable is used in this particular concentration camp. The correlation between Texas public schools and prisons is very, very deep. A lot of the schools that are built in Texas are built to also be able to be used as a correctional unit because if the funding runs out for that school, then they can make money off of imprisoning people. This is lots of evidence. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but there's a lot there. So that's one thing about this particular facility. So the first portable that you are in is where you get all of your stuff scanned. And then from there, you exit that portable, go through kind of like a rickety metal bridge over into the legal portable. So where all of the attorneys are meeting with their clients. That's where we worked. Attorneys are no longer allowed to be in the facility. ICE has revoked their admission into there, so I can only imagine how much worse it has become. But what we saw was that portable, and then that portable has a bunch of very small rooms that you can meet one-on-one with your clients in, with a window that the guards can look into. And both of the exits are guarded by guards. There are guards patrolling to make sure that things are not happening, but overall, when I was working there, the guards were respectful of attorney-client confidentiality, so did not listen to us as much as you might suspect. They were constantly listening to us, but they were mostly at the 2 exits so that we could not leave without their approval. In that particular portable, there was a room specifically for children. So if we were meeting with a client, or if a client, a mother, it was only female adults, and then all different genders of children. And children all the way from newborn babies all the way until 18. So they were all in that facility. Mostly it was young children, young toddlers, and infants. I remember constant screaming. the children were constantly crying and screaming. And one of the rules in that facility is that you are not allowed to have physical touch with any of the people in that facility. So the only physical touch that you can have in that facility are handshakes and high fives. So I vividly remember a small child, orphaned child, without a mother or a father, crying and running to me with his arms outstretched. And I had to refuse a hug to that child and instead shake his hand. I can only imagine Liam and all of the other children screaming, crying, wanting to be held, and the refusal to be held. It honestly, it's just creating so much trauma. My experience of it, I just as an adult experiencing that refusal of humanity for these children. It's a level of evil that I don't know how to express. So the only way that I could connect to these children, who many of them were orphaned, would be through drawing, because we were allowed pen and paper. So all of my notebooks are filled with attorney notes, but also children's drawings. All of them, these are all drawings of children in concentration camps. And again, this was in 2018, so this has been going on for a long time. I would play, games with them. And again, they were anywhere from infant toddlers to 15, 16, 14-year-olds. Most of them were toddlers. Most of them were children. Children. It goes on and on. This is one child just drawing spirals. Dots. I remember each of these children. Pages and pages and pages and pages of children's drawings in concentration camps in the United States. I asked, part of what we were doing there as legal advocates for these people, these human beings, I want to keep reiterating that these are human beings, was that the law in the United States states that if you have a credible fear to leave your country and seek asylum, you can seek asylum here in the United States and we will grant you asylum. And there are certain qualifications that make it so that you have a credible fear, they call it credible fear, to leave your country and seek asylum. And most of them have to do with a fear of your life, being persecuted because you're a part of a particular class of people. and that there's no redress within your own country. So most of what we were doing as legal advocates was trying to hear their story and help them make the strongest case that they could make to get asylum in the United States. And so a lot of that was asking them about what their story was, what their journey was to get into that facility. And so this was a child trying to explain to me how he got to that concentration camp. So he flew on a plane and then got on a train and then went in one car and then another car and then a truck. I think what's hard for people to realize is that all of these people coming here, immigrating to our country, are fleeing imminent violence. So we also heard the stories when someone was old enough to tell us their story about why they were fleeing. And countless stories. I'm going to say a lot of really violent words. Just fast forward through this if you don't want to be triggered. Direct quotes. They told a young girl, "If you stay here, we will kill you. We will kill you tomorrow." People being beat, people being raped, people being gang stalked. We will take your kids, we will kill your kids, kidnapping, gangs showing up at work, constantly following them, constantly threatening them with violence, imminent violence, saying that they will, a lot of the stories were, if your child does not join our gang, we will kill you and your entire family. And the people who were telling them this were largely gangs. The primary gangs that I talked with people about were 18 and MS-13. So these are two gangs that their name, 18 and MS-13, are named after streets in California. So we literally exported these gangs to other countries, and the level of violence that is occurring has forced people to leave their homes, to flee their homes, and seek asylum here in the United States. If it was not for those gangs that started in California, that started in the United States, that are exports of our country, many of these people likely would not have had to fear for their lives for their entire lives, would not have had to take planes, trains, cars, swimming through paths to come here to the United States. So that's another level of why were all of these people immigrating? Well, since the Munroe Doctrine, the United States has colonized Central and South America. We have taken their labor, right? We've taken their natural resources. We have pumped in our propaganda and our violent strategies. So that's a level of, I think, understanding that deepens this empathetic connection to every single human being in those camps, those children in those camps. As young as 6 or 8, being drafted into these gangs and forced to join the gang, or your entire family will be killed. So if you take a moment and think about what you would do in that situation, if your child was being groomed to join a gang and there was nothing you could do about it, and if they didn't join the gang, which meant they had to kill people and they had to experience a violent life path, If they didn't join the gang, you yourself would be killed and everyone around you would be killed. They also were escaping persecution by governments that often the United States had a hand in creating. We've installed dictators in other countries. There's no denying that. But just that layer of it, to hear that story repeated over and over and over again with different clients that I worked with, that this is not a one-off occurrence. This was a pretty much consistent, similar story that these people were escaping, and the hand that our country had in creating that violence. The gangs following them from country to country, obsessed. My client experienced persecution in the form of threats to her and her family. Her family is being persecuted by a group that the government is not only unable and unwilling to control, but connected with. They have communicated threats to both her as well as her children and father. She is afraid for her and her family. She cannot relocate. She has tried, and they have followed her wherever she relocates. They continue to stalk her to this day. The gang has communicated to her that she either had to submit to the gang, which is one of the gangs from California, or suffer the consequences, which would be death, rape, beatings to her and her family. The police in her area are connected to the gang. Someone she knew told her of a woman who went to the police, and the police notified the gang, and they retaliated by killing the woman, killing her entire family, and raping her children in front of her. That's just one story. The amount of trauma that these people have experienced. And then to get into the United States, many of them hired coyotes, which is someone who, it's an unreliable person, right? It's not regulated. So sometimes they're swindlers. Sometimes they actually help you cross over into the United States, either legally or illegally. Again, in the United States, the law is that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you have a legal right to seek asylum in our country if you have a credible fear to leave your country and seek asylum here. So even if you came in illegally, if you have a credible fear to leave your country and seek asylum, you are legally allowed to be here in the United States, and you will get your due trial. And having seen several of those trials, they are intensive trials. They have to meet the standard of credible fear to seek asylum in this country. And if we think about it, that is a Christian value, right? That is a fundamental value. That is an American value, that if you are being persecuted because of your religion, because of your race, because of your identity in any way, that we are a safe harbor for you. What is the Statue of Liberty for if not that? So often these women or these young children have no money whatsoever. They have spent whatever money they have, or they owe someone. Sometimes in 2018, coyotes cost about $4,000 to $5,000. So a lot of these women and a lot of these children were in debt, and many of them told me that they were afraid for their other family members' lives that were back wherever they came from, or for their own life, because if they didn't pay that debt, the coyotes would go after their family. So they were stuck in this concentration camp, desperate for money. And so a lot of them, this is where the corporation and making money off of the prison industry, the prison industrial complex here in the United States, and how much people are making off of the suffering and torture of others. So in the CORE Civic South Texas Family Residential Facility in 2018, the women that I worked with, they would work a 6-hour day and they would make $2.50. At that time, the work was cleaning the facility, making sure the facility was working. Basically, CORE Civic used slave labor at that time. And to this day, many of the migrant internment camps use very, very low paid labor. And in prisons, right, the 14th Amendment makes a qualification for slavery is allowed to exist within the prisons, within incarceration. So if we look at how much money they are making off of the internment of migrants, and what kind of contracts, if you look at who's getting those contracts, again, in 2018, I knew it was CORE Civic and Geo Group. Those were the main ones that were making money off of the internment of migrants. Today, I'm not sure what those are. Someone else would know more than me. But looking at that, that's another thing that would be important to look at. Here's some more drawings. And these are only a few drawings. I mean, these are children in concentration camps today in the United States. This was in 2018, but many of them are still there. This one has my name, their name. We tried to sneak in music. Music was not allowed. We were not allowed to make music with them, but we tried to sneak in paper clips, use paper clips in plastic bottles as shakers, and to teach them music theory, because there were a few children that loved music, loved to sing. We have a handbook working in those facilities. And again, legal advocates are no longer allowed inside of Dilley. Okay, so the layout of the camp. We were not allowed to see where the children and the women were living. We were not given access to those areas. We were not allowed to see those areas. All we were allowed access to was the first portable that had the 2 metal detectors and scanners for all of our belongings. And then we left that portable and went into the legal advocate portable. And then there was another set of metal detectors and making sure you don't have anything. Out when we left, that every day our clients had to go through as they left meeting with us. And then when we had meetings with the immigration judges, we would leave the legal portable where we would meet with the clients, go through another set of scanning to make sure we weren't carrying anything, and go into another portable that had these super tiny rooms. The rooms in that portable, it could only fit a desk with a computer on it, and barely a chair behind it that someone could pull out, and then on the other side, right next to the door, 2 chairs where the lawyer or the legal advocate would sit alongside the client. So you would walk in and immediately there's a desk with a computer and a judge sitting behind the desk. So super like weird space, right? Very small space. And this is where your client or one of these people and children, also children, would be making their claims for a credible fear. So we would be sitting alongside them. And that process was a very detached. Essentially, the judge needed to hear from the client the credible fear. So the judge would ask a lot of questions to the client. The judge would not speak in Spanish. The judge, even though most of the judges, I believe, also spoke Spanish, they would not speak in the language of the client. They would only speak in English. And they had a very rough translation on the computer. Which made the process very disjointed because everything was being translated through a computer translator that was very, if you think like rough, not a very easy translation. And so the client had to explain their journey to the United States and why they were trying to claim asylum here in the United States. And then that judge would make a decision, and based on that decision, the woman would either be immediately deported, or the child would be immediately deported, or they would be bused to another location and given a date for their follow-up trial. They would have another court hearing to follow up on their immigration. While I was working in the facility, we would leave, we would go through all of the layers of metal detectors, everything, leaving. We would drive off. It's everything is very flat. And often when we were leaving, it would be dark outside. And so it looked like, if you grew up in Texas and you saw like Friday Night Lights with like those big overhead lights, it looked like that. The camp has a bunch of like big overhead lights. And so driving off, it looks like kind of surreal because it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in Dilley. There's not a whole lot going on. And then there's this big tent and then a bunch of portables with these bright lights over it. Drove off. I was staying at a motel, probably about an 8-minute drive from the facility, 9-minute drive. And I would go to, there was a bar and a restaurant nearby. So I would go there, and it was one of the only restaurants in the area. So a lot of the guards in the actual facility would go to that same restaurant. Again, small town. Dilley is a company town. So really one of the only ways that people in that town can make money to feed their family is to work in the concentration camp. There's a lot to be said there, and I have a lot more insight into, the stories that I was told. I was invited to meals with those families, seeing what kind of, a lot of them lived in trailers, not very different from the portables that the women and children were living in. So that's another layer that maybe not now, we don't want to explore now, but is another layer of like, the divide is not between us, it's between the corporations and all of the suffering and all of the torture that is going on. I remember one of the guards talking to me and saying how lucky those children had it, because there was this giant flat screen that was just playing loud, very obnoxious children's shows on it. And he's like, I can't afford to have a TV. They get to have a TV in here. It's so unfair. So there's so many layers. I don't know what information is important to share, so I'm just sharing everything that I know about that particular facility, because I also know how strict they were about having no cameras, no phones, no pictures of the inside of the facility.
My last day working at a detention facility in Texas. This is a family detention facility. It is an internment camp. It is where the children are being kept and the families, the women and children. And it is owned by CORE Civic. CORE Civic is a for-profit corporation that's making billions of dollars off of the internment of migrants. These people are seeking credible fear interviews where they have to assert that they have a credible fear to leave their country and seek asylum. After they leave this detention facility, Residential Center by CORE Civic. You see the tent, and then everything else is portables.